Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the DLF Trade Show on the DLF YouTube channel. I'm still not used to pointing in directions, and we've been doing this for 3 years. Russ and Addison are reeling from the draft still, and I have at least 5 rookie drafts going and 1 auction going, and my head is still spinning. But we're not talking about rookie. Well, we're sort of not talking about rookies just yet. Rookie draft still going on. I really am looking forward to talking to you, Addison, about a couple of rookies valuations going forward. But right now we're talking about veteran winners of the NFL draft, which, I mean, spoiler alert for what next week is going to be. Just get ready for that. But we're going to let some ADP, build up from rookie drafts. I run 16-ish leagues. So, by the time we're 2 weeks from now, I should have a lot of drafts ready to go and talk about. But we're talking about players already in the NFL that have played in the NFL already, that their situation is improved, either based on players that were drafted or players that were not drafted. And to start is one player that I've been talking about a little lately, and a lot of it is because it seems like I value him more than a lot of people do already. And things went up for Bryce Young in this past draft. By whatever you think of Xavier Legette, it was he was a wide receiver drafted in the first round. I've learned to change my phrasing. He's not a first-round wide receiver. He's a wide receiver drafted in the first round.
It feels accurate.
But regardless, they grabbed Deontay Johnson earlier in the non-point scoring season. They drafted a wide receiver, and then in the second round, they draft a running back. Again, a running back who is probably not starting the season anyway. But with all the work they've put into their offense since the end of last season, it shows commitment to the offense, and that means a lot to me. Whether the Panthers are the kind of organization to get the right players for that to be helpful is another question, which we'll see, I guess, down the road. But I do still consider Bryce Young a winner from this draft.
It's been a culmination of everything that has happened this offseason, basically. Like you said, like trading for Deontay Johnson, that was step number 1 of like, we need more help for Bryce Young and guys that can actually separate when they run routes. That's not just Adam Thielen. And even then, Thielen he's turning 34 already. He's 34 years old. He's on his way out the door career-wise. But getting Deontay, fantastic. I have found myself higher on Xavier Legette than probably like 95% of the community. He's actually my wide receiver 6 in this rookie class, just because the upside and potential is just oozing from a guy that's like 6'3", 215 pounds. And, like there's so much there that could go right. There might be a slimmer probability that it does, as a 5th-year breakout. Didn't do anything for the first literally nothing for 4 years. But if you want to have a breakout 5th-year season, it's the 5th-year season that Legette had that you want to have. So I think there is upside, and he doesn't need to be the best wide receiver ever coming in when he already has Deontay. So he can develop a little bit more in the NFL and kind of be that big slot guy, a quarterback's best friend essentially for Bryce Young. And then Jonathan Brooks is a great wide receiver or great receiver out of the backfield as well. So, and he should just help the offense too. Plus they drafted Jatavion Sanders. I feel like people forget about that too, but he was the tight end 2 for like the consensus tight end 2. And they got him in the 4th round. So,
it was the first pick of the 4th round. I remind everyone of this whenever that's brought up. That's practically day 2. It's practically day 2. Let's face it. Round 3 ended a little early. They could have kept going a little bit, and if they had just done 1 pick in that night of round 4, he would have been a day 2 pick.
Yep,
that's what I'm sticking with.
A lot of great weapons. Plus, you add in Dave Canales and the quarterback guru that he's become, fixing Geno Smith, fixing Baker Mayfield, fixing Bryce Young. So there is upside and potential here, especially if you can get Young as more of kind of like a QB3 price. And maybe he grows into being a kind of QB2 or just like a guy that you feel comfortable streaming in good matchups. With the upside of still, I don't think he's ever going to be a QB1, but like the upside is still there, I think, for the guy that went 1.01 in last year's draft.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
NFL draft.
Yeah. So let's get to the trades that are in here. 12-team Superflex Bryce Young trades. Jordan Addison and Bryce Young. Oh, that's such a beautiful start to a roster. Like if you're rebuilding, going to get an Addison and Bryce Young. So Addison and Bryce Young for the 108 and a 25 first. Addison in at 403, Bryce Young 246. Disrespectful. For a total of 648. The 108, 312, the 25 first, 259 for a total of 571. So I agree with this, that this is handily the Young and Addison side. So let me ask you, around that 108, 109, and let's pretend, like I'll give you a couple of options. Jordan and Addison, or those quarterbacks, May and McCarthy, or if you want to go wide receiver, chances are you're looking at Zamir Worthy here. Would you keep Addison above them, or would you take any of those three?
I would take the quarterbacks over Addison. But I would take Addison over Worthy. But I would take Brian Thomas Jr. over Jordan Addison. BTJ is my wide receiver 4,
which is great because you don't have to. Batman BTJ is like the consummate 111. Like that is where he was drafted in almost every single draft, was the 111.
That's fantastic value, especially after they just cut Zay Brown. So
you get your guy without having to pay up for him.
Yep. But I think Jordan Addison would slot in around the 1.08 in a draft this year. I mean, that's basically where he was last year, and we have relatively the same number of quarterbacks, +1, potentially going top 8 than we had last year. But I think they're more or less a wash. And then, but as for Bryce Young and then the 25 first, I would take Young over the first. So that's where the main difference for this comes.
That's kind of what I was trying to get to. Like, what pick do you really value Addison at? And I can see the conversation starting at the 108. You're going to take Bowers and Odunze over Addison at this point. Mm-hmm. And then you hit that 7-8, and then the question becomes, do you want these quarterbacks that are either cap ceiling prospect wise or cap ceiling situation wise? Or do you take the wide receiver who, again, is so much more than a deep threat and landed with the best quarterback in the league? Like, if you're going to trust a coach to not misuse someone, it's Andy Reid, right? So hopefully they realize that Zamir Worthy is not just a fast guy, because he's so much more. But, Addison falls around there. At worst, the 1-9, 110 kind of area, in which case, like, I don't know. Like, this doesn't seem enough to get these players, especially not without a guarantee of that 25 first being non-playoff, which literally you can't guarantee unless your league has some sort of conditional trades, which I would love to have, but I'm far too lazy to keep track of.
And the technical aspect of that would be insane. I wanted to get your take on this because this is a very interesting trade, both from a contending versus rebuild, or just because it's all basically young players. Like the two rookies are going to be 21, 22. Addison and Young, as of right now, are 22 years old. So this could fit for any team basically in any direction. But if you are a rebuilder, it might feel counterintuitive to trade away 2 first-round picks. But like, you're getting 2 young guys back. You don't have any issues about that whatsoever?
No, like, this is the ideal situation of 2 people that are rebuilding, where maybe this one manager has these 2 players that he's not super sold on. Like, man, Addison's always going to be second fiddle to Justin Jefferson, which, again, not a terrible thing. And then Bryce Young didn't look good, so I want to re-roll. And that's exactly what they're doing. They got the 108, where, again, they can re-roll on either of them. Like, you can walk into Zamir Worthy, or you can walk into one of these quarterbacks, and you're literally re-rolling specifically those 2 positions. And then you have the 25 first, where we know is going to be very good with running backs and a couple of very good wide receivers. Quarterback, you're probably not re-rolling next year. But still, like, this is a fine move, again, in theory. I want more. Like, even if that was the 112 this year, which is not as valuable as a future first, I think. But, like, I would still feel better knowing what that is than just a random 25 first. But the next trade is actually a very interesting one, because there's 2 topics of conversation on this one. Straight up, 12-team Superflex, Bryce Young for Tank Dell. Bryce Young still at 245.6, Tank Dell at 323.0. So analyzers coming in saying the answer is Tank Dell. I value-wise believe the answer is probably Tank Dell. Like everything we say, you need to overpay a little bit when you're getting a quarterback without sending one back, and that's kind of what we're doing here. We're talking 80 points, which on the analyzer is probably early third-ish, without having to actually do any work and looking anything up. Like it's not a lot, but still it's a difference, especially on a straight-up trade of one player for one player. And this is clearly one of those, oh man, Steph Diggs, crowded wide receiver room kind of things. And I think...
Well, now there's more news around Tank Dell that is even...
Well, Tank Dell got a minor injury from being shot in Florida the other day, released from the hospital and recovering and fine. But yeah, that's something that happened in this world. But yeah, like if you're taking, especially wide receivers, even though we've seen Tank Dell produce, but he's coming off an injury. They bring in Steph Diggs. If you're feeling iffy about a wide receiver who's valued pretty well, go and flip him for a young quarterback. Absolutely. Like I get this kind of in both ways. Because again, I'm doing my best to not come at this from a guy who likes and believes in Bryce Young, because a lot of people don't. A lot of people are A, out on the Panthers in general, and B, out on Bryce Young with how poorly he showed. But again, I blame that on the Panthers and a little on CJ Stroud. It is CJ Stroud's fault for doing too well that people are this low on Bryce Young. Like, it's not fair that we have that to compare this to. But I get this from both sides, and I'm fine with it on both sides.
So I've been pretty out on Bryce Young like all offseason, even after the move of hiring Dave Canales and trading for Deontay, and even still a little bit after the draft. I know they added like 3 solid weapons for him that have upside and potential.
And they did sign some linemen in free agency. I don't remember who they are or remembering if they're good or not. But again, it shows that they're trying.
And their defense is probably going to be horrible. So
give away Brian Burns. Yeah, that's going to happen.
For significantly less than what you were offered a year ago. But anyway, yes, their defense is probably going to be really bad. So Young is probably going to have to throw a lot.
Yeah.
Or potentially a lot. But I'm taking Bryce Young on this one just because I feel like I value the quarterback more than I do the wide receiver. And I can understand how maybe you don't necessarily want to do this if you're buying Bryce Young as your QB3 as like a depth quarterback.
Yes.
And Tank Dell was maybe like your 10th or 11th starter in a start 10 or 11, and you don't really have a better option after that. So I understand it from that point. But at the same time, like I feel like a wide receiver in this range of ADP and in that whole entire like massive tier of all these wide receiver 2s, essentially, I would trade probably a good majority of them for a Bryce Young kind of a player. Because if Bryce Young actually starts looking solid, and I mean, there were flashes last year. Like it wasn't like you said, like it wasn't really Bryce Young was just bad. It was just the situation was terrible last year. So if that improves, Bryce Young improves, obviously heading into year 2. Dave Canales' offense opens things up for him. And he has a Baker Mayfield kind of a season, like that would significantly raise his value. And that would significantly raise his value more than Tank Dell, especially Tank Dell in an offense with Nico, with Diggs, with Joe Mixon now. Dalton Schultz is still there. So, if you want to roll the dice on a high upside player in Bryce Young, I'd go for it.
I'm a little surprised that the Raiders waited until, hold on, I don't have it pulled up in front of me anymore. Literally the last running back taken, round 6, pick 32. And it was Dylan, I think it's Laube, or I can't remember.
I've heard like 5 different pronunciations for his last name.
Like, I love it when players come out and say, this is how you say my name, because then we can just get over it, except for Tyrod Taylor. I don't care that his dad said it's Tyrod. My brain is broken at that. I still call him Tyrod. But they, for all intents and purposes, didn't really draft a running back. That's especially a worry for Zamir White. So technically he's a winner. Are you giving up the 201 for Zamir White right now? Like, you're pretty much saying I'm going to take Zamir White over Trey Benson and Jonathan Brooks, because that's around where they're getting drafted, at least from what I've seen at this point.
Nope. That's crazy. I think Zamir White has entered I think you got to treat Zamir White as if he's like 28 years old and is the starter for the Raiders.
Yeah, like you'll have to use him at best for a year, and maybe you'll get points out of him.
Yeah, he's going to be a good 1 year rental, like James Conner, maybe, or like Eckler or Aaron Jones. Maybe you get a second year out of him because he does have the 2 years of rookie deal left. But
yeah,
I mean, he's not going to get a major contract after that, and he might not even be the starter next year. So it's just like it's a 1 year rental, and I'm not mortgaging somebody like Jonathan Brooks or Trey Benson, or honestly even or Brandon Ayuk.
Jump right in.
Yeah.
In a 12-team Superflex league, Baker Mayfield and Zamir White were traded for Brandon Ayuk. Baker Mayfield 175, Zamir White 87 for a total of 262. Yeah, Zamir White's probably going to go up a little bit because they didn't draft anyone, but not even up to the 172 that Baker is, I don't think. And then Brandon Ayuk by himself at 503. I understand that Baker is a quality QB2 for our fantasy teams. And I understand that Ayuk sadly did not get traded to a place where he can be the guy, because that's clearly not going to happen in San Francisco. A little shocking they spend first round capital on a wide receiver and then don't find a way to move either Ayuk or Debo, who they claimed both were on the block to move up in the first. That may have been a rumor, but still.
That's like how the Patriots said that 3 was on the block, and then the Vikings offer like 4 first-round picks, and they're like, "Nah, we're staying."
Yeah, and they made their pick. The Patriots
they weren't really on the block.
Yeah, no. But still, Ayuk being. I mean, I really like Ayuk, and even in the San Francisco offense, I think he's very capable of having a top 12 fantasy season. Especially with what appears to be the downhill of George Kittle's career. And, Debo plays a specific way, which leads to him getting nicked up a lot. I never want any player to get hurt, but that's why we love Debo. That's why he's called Debo, because that dude plays angry. But that leads to issues. So which means Ayuk is a mainstay on that offense. And again, Baker being a fine QB2 on your team and Zamir White maybe being a 1-year plug-in. I don't see how you trade Ayuk for this in any way, shape, or form.
This is a really bad deal. I think this is actually the most recent deal for Zamir White in the Trade Finder, or one of the most recent ones. This is a pretty...
and good for you for being able to recognize that there's a team that might need a running back, and now you could say, well, the Raiders didn't bring anybody in. And you clearly got more than 86.9 points from the analyzer worth out of him on this trade.
Zamir White's value has been on the rise ever since he had like that 4-game stretch last year without Josh Jacobs, which was a great 4-game stretch. But he feels like this year's Alexander Madison, which is coincidence because Zamir White's backup is now Alexander Madison. But like, people are expecting him to just come in and be the 1-for-1 replacement of the elite guy that was in front of him. And it's not going to happen based on really small sample sizes. And so like, I don't know, Zamir White's value has always been, I think, overinflated in my eyes since the end of last year. Now you get to a point where he is actually confirmed to basically be the starter heading into 2024 because he survived the draft and free agency. I just don't know what that means, though. Like, I'm looking at April running back ADP, and he was already the RB28. But here are like the 7 names that are in front of him: Tyjae Spears, Najee Harris, David Montgomery, Tony Pollard, Alvin Kamara, Ramondre Stevenson, Trey Benson, Joe Mixon. How does he climb over any of those guys? I just don't know how you put Zamir White up any higher than this. And maybe he doesn't climb any more running backs wise, but like he climbs overall wise because now people might feel confident about having a starter and a starter in an offense that we have seen like elite fantasy production from over the past couple of years. And if you can take advantage of that inflated value, by all means, please go for it, because I do not see it the exact same way.
So let's see what this next trade is. 12-team, 1 quarterback, 208, 209, and Zamir White, who is at the bottom of that list, value up, for the 108. The 208, 136, the 209, 132, and Zamir White, 108 for a total of 376. The 108 by itself is 348.5. So we've compiled enough value to equal the 108, but clearly this is nickels for a 50-cent coin, like a $half.
Notice how you said compiled.
Like I don't want to call the 108 and a 1 QB $1. Man, hold on. Let's pull this up. I'm going to pull up a rookie draft that's going on and just take the quarterbacks out. So we have Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Odunze, Bowers. Hold on, let me pull up a different one because this is one where Keon Coleman got taken really early.
But those are the 4.
Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas Jr., Ladd McConkey, Jonathan Brooks, Xavier Leggett. So this is the area we're talking. This Jonathan Brooks, Xavier Leggett, Trey Benson, Ricky Pearsall, and this Keon Coleman, A.D. Mitchell. Like these are the guys around the 108 in a 1 QB. And this is, I think it's a little in front of that pick your flavor kind of thing. Like to me, it's still within a tier of like, I'll put Brooks, Benson, and McConkey and Brian Thomas Jr. in a tier together. Like in my mind, in a 1 QB, those 4 should go before the end of the first. Like they should be the 1-8 to the 112 or whatever that math is. 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, like, but close enough. But Ricky Pearsall, Keon Coleman, A.D. Mitchell, like those guys can be in the second. That's fine. But like, are you trading the shot at these guys who are A, talented, B, ended in good landing spots? Like, how do you give that up for Zamir White and late seconds? I don't
get it at all.
See it at all.
Yeah, especially like if you just want to say, let's say that 1.08 is Jonathan Brooks and just make it really easy and say, would you rather have Jonathan Brooks or Zamir White at the same position plus a couple second round shots, and I still don't understand how you would not take Jonathan Brooks in that because A, you get somebody that's 3 years younger, somebody who is significantly better. We're talking about a second round running back versus a 4th round running back in terms of draft capital. I don't understand how you make this deal. And this is something that I said with the other trade. Like if you can take advantage of somebody seeing that Zamir White is going to be the Raiders starter this year, again, this could be Alexander Madison 2.0. Take advantage of it and please sell away Zamir White for what apparently feels like a haul at this point for a player of that kind of value, because these are ridiculous trades. And like, I'm not just cherry picking like the 2 worst trades in the Zamir White trade finder, but there are like some other ones in here that are really, really bad. I was trying to stall for my computer to load the web page. Still trying to stall.
This is what you do for a living, Addison. This is embarrassing that you are having to wait for this. Like, come on.
There we go.
I was not going to stall for you. I was sitting here in silence until that came up.
I got it. Somebody traded the 111 in the Superflex League for Zamir White straight up.
Whew.
Somebody traded Zamir Cooper Kupp in a 25 second for Nico Collins. Zamir in the 2.02 in a Superflex for Russell Wilson and George Kittle. I understand that one a little more. Zamir White and Jonathan Mingo for Rashee Rice. Zamir White and the 110 for the 106 in a Superflex League. Zamir and Jake Ferguson for Dalton Kincaid. This is
so much Zamir White value that should not be there. So if you have
Zamir and Mike Evans for Kenneth Walker,
go looking, I think is what it comes down to.
Sheesh, dude. Trade Zamir White.
And
a lot of these actually that I just said were before the draft. So now add in his inflated post-draft value that he survived. Oh my God.
Crazy.
He's going to be a top 15 dynasty running back.
So let's move on. So the next guy on this list is Zay Flowers. It felt like the Ravens should bring more into their offense. I know they brought in Derrick Henry, but Andrew, like seeing what happened after Andrews got hurt and things getting iffy back and forth between Likely or Flowers, and with Rashad Bateman seeming like he's not going to be a thing. So like, I'm cool now with them not really bringing in another pass catcher to really worry about. and let his value go up a little bit so I can maybe move away on some of my shares. But I guess that depends. Let's see what the trades are. 12-team Superflex, Zay Flowers for Steph Diggs and Derrick Henry. Was this at least done after the Steph Diggs move to Houston?
Yes.
Okay. So Zay Flowers, 12-team Superflex at 336.8. Steph Diggs at 174. Derrick Henry at 170 for a total of 344. I get this move is a very competing versus roster building move. And I get that I just said that I don't super value Zay Flowers that much, but I think I still want Zay Flowers in this. Though, if it were August or September and I'm ready to put points on a board, I think I might do this. If Zay Flowers is my like 6th or 7th wide receiver, which there's a decent chance he might be in my head. But right now, this isn't a move I really want to do. Though I also love that Baltimore didn't really bring in a running back. So Derrick Henry is clearly the dude in Baltimore, and it's a great situation for him to be in because we never really expected him to catch passes anyway. So we don't have to worry that he's not going to catch the passes. And Steph Diggs is a little worrisome, but he's still Stephon Diggs. He's still really, really good and has a really, really good quarterback throwing him the ball. Not that he didn't before. But I still think he'll be very usable for your fantasy teams. How different than Zay Flowers at this point is what is making me super iffy. Like a normal season of Zay Flowers, I think, will be what a normal season of Steph Diggs is right now. So technically, you're getting that same production and adding Derrick Henry, which again, I don't want to do now, but I get it in August and September that maybe I'd be more willing to do something like this. But right now, give me the 23-year-old wide receiver.
Yeah, that's the tricky part of this because, we're talking about 2 30-year-old players, one of them being a running back. And even if we fast forward a year from now, I mean, Zay Flowers is probably going to at worst like hold his value just because we're going to be talking about like a 24-year-old wide receiver still in a good offense, probably still like the 1A, 1B next year, depending on if they draft somebody or add somebody in free agency, but still like a solid player that has a good target share, good pedigree. And then we're going to be talking about a 31-year-old Steph Diggs, who's a free agent, and a 31-year-old Derrick Henry, who, up in the air in terms of what his value is going to be if he's actually still fantastic on the Ravens. God forbid he gets hurt, then that would just be that would just probably ruin his entire career for Dynasty.
Yeah.
And then so it would just be basically like, can you stomach the massive value difference not only now but also like a year from now between these two sides? And is that enough like points wise for you to like, is the production warranted to be able to lose that difference in value? Which Zay Flowers, I mean, might be he might take a step forward this year. It's not unknown, but I do agree.
Possibility, yeah, for sure.
I do agree that I think if you're going for points, Diggs is going to replace a lot of what Flowers is. Maybe he's better, maybe he's slightly worse, but Derrick Henry is going to be, I think, fantastic. So it's points versus value. Which side do you want?
Yeah, and this could easily be one of those things for your team where if you win, it was completely worth it anyway.
Yep.
Right? And that is a little too hindsighty to really, put into the conversation here. But like I said, it's the way I play where I have such a hard time giving up dynasty value for fantasy value in even May. But if you are either in a not very active league or you like looking at your lineup and feeling good about it in May, which again, I'm not saying is wrong, it's just not how I play, then I love this trade for you. I love putting in Diggs and Derrick Henry in a starting lineup and only losing Zay Flowers in that lineup. And this next one I love is more straightforward for the situation that we're in right now. Zay Flowers for the 110 and 204. We've already talked about a lot of the players that are around in the 110 area. We're talking some version of Worthy and Brian Thomas Jr., the running backs, maybe, Bo Nix will probably be there, but maybe a McCarthy or May fall even further in your weird draft when someone takes Keon Coleman at the 107. I'm going to keep talking about that. I mean, I love you, Antonio, but you go get your guy, but like you could have traded back. So you've talked about, being a Brian Thomas Jr. guy and at least liking Xavier Worthy in his landing spot. Do you take Flowers over either of them? And let's not even talk about the 204 yet.
If you're just comparing Flowers versus the 110, I'm definitely taking Brian Thomas Jr. over Zay Flowers. I don't know if I would take Worthy over Flowers. I probably would because I think everybody else would.
It's one of those things where it's the right move because it's something you don't have to do. Like
he feels more marketable
over him.
Right.
Draft worthy, then you trade him for Flowers in the 204. You put that on the put that second pick on the other side.
Right. I would take Jonathan Brooks over Zay Flowers as well. So I feel like, again, this is kind of like how we were like the Jordan Addison trade at the very beginning was like, I feel like this is where he should slide in. Me personally, I just like a couple other rookies in that range to where Flowers' value might be a little bit lower. But when you add in the 2.04, that's also not a bad deal because then you get somebody else maybe at the back end of that tier. Or maybe in the the middle of the next tier, like what you were talking about, where if you kind of put BTJ, Brooks, and Worthy in a tier of their own, then you kind of get into like the Leggett's and the Colemans and the Purcells, and maybe you want to throw Trey Benson in that tier, or Bo Nix might still be there. You get one of those guys at least with the 2.04. That's not a bad plus if you already are kind of like wishy-washy on if you want the rookie or Flowers at the 110.
Yeah, and I'm honestly just taking those wide receivers, and man, it's really hard for me to say that I want to take a running back over a wide receiver, over a 23-year-old wide receiver who's at least shown that he's capable. But like, I might want too much immediate. Like if I'm drafting a running back, I usually like want immediate production out of him, which is not going to happen for Brooks, even though I think it still should happen this season. Like he's not going to be ready for the beginning of the season, right?
Yeah, he is. He said he's going to be ready for training camp.
Oh, I've stopped disbelieving when all of these players come back so much earlier than we thought they should. I've stopped disbelieving what they say. But yeah, so like there's a lot of guys, but even if let's just talk wide receivers at this point, I think regardless of how into Worthy and I keep
BTJ.
Yeah, I keep going to say Franklin when it is Brian Thomas Jr. Like even if you're not super into those two, they both landed in spots where they have the easy path to be the wide receiver one on their team. I would easily take them two by themselves over Zay Flowers. Again, now adding to me the pick being on the wrong side where I get a second dart throw at AD Mitchell or running back X or wide receiver, whatever, or Bo Nix. Like that is icing on top.
It's probably this is the deal where it's like whichever side that second was on is the side I'm taking because it's like just early enough and just good enough of a rookie that it is a solid tiebreaker between two players that are relatively similar in terms of value and maybe potential production for like a year one rookie versus a year two wide receiver who had a big target share last year.
But for now, this has been the DLF Trade Show on the DLF YouTube channel. Russ Fisher, Dynasty Outhouse. Oh, you remember to put the names up.
I did.
It's like 3 weeks in a row that we realize as I'm saying the names, I'm like, our names aren't there. Yeah, I mean, I know our handles by heart clearly, but like I still read them every single time because I'm crazy. But hey, good job. Russ Fisher, Dynasty Outhouse, Addison Hayes, Adam Hayes, _. We'll catch you next time.